this afternoon, and we know for a fact it's going to be very beneficial to all of you. So without further ado, Sergeant Perez, I turn it back over to you, sir.
All right, everyone. So I'm Master Sergeant Perez, Sergeant at Arms for your top 3. And today we have awesome guests, Chief Master Sergeant Branstetter and Chief Master Sergeant Storman. And they're going to talk about the EPB, which is perfect timing. Everyone's scrambling to figure this thing out and get working on it. So definitely appreciate all of you guys signing in and getting some great mentorship from these 2 leaders. I wanted to give some huge props to Master Sergeant Huerta from our Professional Development Committee who put this together. So I'll let him introduce our guest, and we'll go ahead and take it off from there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, like I said, I appreciate both chiefs helping us out with a short notice, a change in schedule. So we really appreciate everything. But Chief Master Sergeant Branstetter and Chief Master Sergeant Storman, just like Sergeant Perez was saying, going to talk to us about EPBs and break some stuff down to help us out. Master Sergeant EPBs are due now, and the tax will be coming up soon. So hopefully we will get some good information and be prepped and ready. So appreciate it, Chiefs. The floor is yours.
Mic check.
We got you, sir.
So I definitely appreciate the invite. I'm Chief Storman. I am the SCL in the 338 for 3 Squadron over here in Wright Pat. I've been here for about a year now. I've been in recruiting for about 21 years, so been in the Air Force for 25, and came into recruiting as a senior airman. So I've been doing this for quite some time, and really enjoy this topic today because writing is near and dear to my heart. I've been trying to hone my skills every year, so look forward to the discussion, and please, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask any questions.
Oh yeah, and hey everybody, I'm Chief Branstetter. I'm here at 331 down at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. Been here a couple months. Been in recruiting since 06. Jumped around through a bunch of different units, a bunch of different assignments since I've been in recruiting. I pay particular attention to writing styles. Trying to make it as easy as I possibly can on everybody that's involved, to prevent us from getting in the way of ourselves, to give some tips and some tricks on just things to watch out for with this new EPB system. And just really, I think the communication about it and talking about it and just getting those reps in and just communicating as a team, particularly at that top 3 level, we're just going to make everything better for our folks, better for ourselves when it comes to reviewing these. And ultimately listing out a performance report that makes sense, that's easy to read, easy to understand, and that's what we're all about. Our game plan on this today is to keep it conversational. It's not trying to turn it into anything super like rigid when it comes to the presentation. What we'd like to do is kind of just stay on track with the slides, because there's a lot of information that we put in there that's going to be beneficial to everybody to just wrap your mind around. And then we got towards the end, we got an opportunity just to kind of crosstalk, to take questions, to throw in some last minute like things that we've learned since we've been reviewing EPBs over the past year, and just try to help you guys out and make you a little bit stronger and a little bit more knowledgeable about this process. So if you got questions while we're rolling and stuff, just either interrupt or put up your hand, put it in the text, whatever, or in the chat, whatever works for you to get your question out there, and we'll be sure to answer it. So I'll turn it back over to Chief Storman, and we'll get rolling on this thing.
All right, next slide. So this is an overview of what we plan on talking about. We're just going to go over the EPB as a whole and the MGAs, the 4 major graded areas. Then we'll move on to performance statements and ROEs. Focus on sentence in punctuation as far as formatting and things like that, because obviously when you're writing performance statements, we're moving away from the format that we're all used to. Right? Acronyms and abbreviations. This has been a topic of the discussion in my squadron. What's approved, what's not approved, where can I find them? We got any toolkits of all of the acronyms. So we'll kind of talk about where you can find those if you're not tracking that. And again, like Chief Branstetter said, we'll have a conversation about areas, some room for improvement, questions that you might have, and just some things that you guys can add to your toolkit. Yeah, Trent.
Yeah, no, I'll tear this one up. So this is just an example of what the form looks like. I know a lot of folks are using the ALQ performance brief to prepare their stuff. And a lot of people just haven't seen what the actual form looks like. So this is just an overview. It's not intended to get in the weeds or anything, but the biggest piece of this, and we should all know this, and we should all catch on to this by now, is the 4 major graded areas. So those major performance areas that they're calling them on the EPB, they align with what's important to the Air Force. They align with what's important to our commanders, and that should equal aligning to what's important to us as senior NCOs. So when we're talking about this, it's really executing the mission, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. We're executing the mission, leading people, managing resources, and improving the unit. That's the foundational big picture 4 elements that we're talking about when it comes to this enlisted performance brief. So does anybody have any questions about the why or the what or anything at all on these 4 major graded or these 4 major performance areas? Because it kind of starts with this mindset of understanding and embracing these, and then getting into the ALQs, which make up those four areas, the actual characteristics that we're looking at growing and developing throughout our force. So any questions, I'll open it up.
Hey, Chief, I got a question. This is Master Sergeant Perry out in 3-1. Where do we capture, or are we still capturing the significant self-improvement and community involvement? These MPAs, it doesn't feel like or look like there's a specific area where it's expected that we're capturing those significant self-improvement or community involvement.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would challenge you to think outside of the box a little bit on that with the significant self-improvement and the community involvement particularly. Now, what's our focus is executing the mission. Our focus is leading people, managing resources, and improving the unit. But I would venture to say that if I'm thinking outside of the box, managing resources, that could be managing time, right? And maybe I manage my time through improving myself. So I took the time to actually improve myself to become a stronger leader, a stronger professional, a better communicator, a better support mechanism for my team. So if I can capture that under managing resources, I'm showing that I'm managing my time pretty darn good, right?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Right.
Okay.
So then we're talking about community involvement, and in the same breath, we like to talk about how the public's awareness about the military, the public's awareness about the Air Force and its ties to the military have declined significantly over the past 20 years, right?
Yes, sir.
So if I'm doing community involvement and different community projects, wouldn't I be kind of improving the unit? Or couldn't that maybe lead to executing the mission in a more productive manner if I'm building those ties with influencers, so on and so forth?
Absolutely. Yes,
right.
Sir.
So that's where we're trying to capture it at. It's not about just capturing it. It's about capturing what you did, but what the actual real deal impact of what you're doing is. So, you can keep at that surface level all you want to, as far as, I volunteered 60 hours doing this and I fed 42 people. That's cool. Like, there's a lot of love and all that. Like, I got it. But if we can tie that into these 4 major graded areas, now we're talking business and we're cooking with grease. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Got it. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
Hey, Chief, it's Staff Sergeant Aguilar out here at 3-6. Just to follow up with that, with the managing resources and how we're tying in, is that more of your preference, or is that what the chief panel itself is looking at as a whole? When you're involving community involvement, schooling and stuff like that, to where you're managing those resources, is that kind of your point of view, or is that what the whole embodiment of managing resources is going to?
No. That's definitely my point of view on that one, man. And I always look at it from, I appreciate the question. So that would be my preference if somebody didn't have anything stronger to be putting in that managing resources, if we didn't have anything to align that we could include in that. So some of the things that we're doing with involvement and self-improvement and stuff like that, it's just good things to do, but may not warrant inclusion on the EPB. Like, it's just a good thing to do. So like, if you have that you're managing a multi-million-dollar budget and you're managing a vehicle fleet that's leading to this or leading to that, I'd probably be trying to include that on my EPB before I included, doing a food drive or something along those lines. But if you have somebody that's sitting there like, this is kind of what I managed at my level, because we're all leading people at totally different levels of responsibility, right? So if we're leading somebody and that's what they have to put in their managing resources, it's our responsibility as writers to be able to write exactly that. Like, this is how this person managed resources that were within their scope of control to manage. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you for clarifying it.
Yeah, right on. No, I appreciate the question.
So you really got to look at the MPA for the different performance areas. And again, like Chief Branstetter was saying, it's really about your level of leadership, because we all have different levels of leadership. So really what you want to do is look at all the ALQs, and we'll get there here in a little bit, but we got to look at the ALQs and find out what exactly fall under those MPAs. So you could actually put down leading people in that portion as far as teamwork and inclusion. If you don't have if you have a whole lot of management resources. So at my level, I may not put down, any type of, top three or chief group in managing resources, because I can utilize that space with something else. I may put it in leading people, but it also depends on what you got going on. So you really got to put down everything that you did for the year, and then, prioritize what's most important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll tell you just another thing on this EPB that I've been seeing, and we'll probably end up talking about this a little bit more, but since it's pulled up, just to bring it up, and Chief Storman or anybody else on here that's been looking at these quite a bit, that duty description, a lot of folks are just kind of glossing over that. They're filling it in with the duty description. They're maxing out the space as much as they can. That just seems to be what's happening, and not putting a ton of thought into what you actually do, which I would highly encourage really sitting down and talking about that, like really getting a solid duty description in there to show your scope of responsibility and what your job is. But what I've been seeing a lot of is like repeating that duty description throughout the 4 major graded areas. Like, we'll do a great job writing the duty description, and then we'll say the exact same thing in every single major graded area. So be careful of doing that, because you're really taking away from your report when you do that, and you're just duplicating information. And it's like, okay, so got it. This person did their duty description, and that's about it. There's nothing else added to that. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, speak up, please.
So what he's saying, for example, let's say if you're a flight chief and you're leading 8 recruiters, and then in your duty description, you're saying you're a flight chief who covers X amount of square miles leading 8 NCOs, and then in executing the mission, you say the same thing. Executed the mission by doing 120%, leading 8 NCOs, covering 4 states and 69,000 square miles. Well, you just said the same thing that they read right above it, right? So you're just wasting space. You can put something more impactful in executing the mission instead of repeating what you just said. On duty description, one of my pet peeves when we were doing the EPRs and even now, a lot of people repeat the same duty description every year and just copy and paste. There's no growth in the duty description. If you look at my EPRs in the past, in some shape, form, or fashion, my duty description is not the same every year. Even though I might be doing the same job, I'm gonna write it to show growth that next year, so I'm not staying the same. So make sure you're paying attention to that too, that you're not staying stagnant and you're writing the same thing down over and over. There has to be growth each year. Otherwise, if we ain't getting better, then what are we doing?
Yeah, but you can go on to the next slide if you don't mind. All right, so I'll give an overview of what this is all about. Once again, the 4 areas that we've been talking about. And now we start, like Chief Foreman was saying before, we're starting to break it down a little bit more into these qualities that we should be talking about while we're doing our ACAs, right? So we should actually be talking about how folks are developing these certain attributes and qualities that the Air Force is looking at within our enlisted force particularly. So that first bullet is, and this is just to kind of piggyback on that EPB, is change your mindset a little bit on the white space. I don't know about y'all, but I grew up like white space at the end of a bullet was a bad thing. It was like horrible. It was the worst thing you could do. And we spent countless hours and 100 different fixes to try to fill up white space and come up with that perfect 9-letter word that took it all the way to the end, right? And it was just kind of silly. But that's what we did. Now, like the Air Force, this ain't Trent's opinion no more. This is Air Force is saying, stop. Like, quit doing all that. Like, say what the person did, what the impact result was, the achievement was. So don't worry so much about the white space. Now, I'll tell you now, this is Trent's opinion. I wouldn't go too crazy on that. I wouldn't leave 50 spaces at the end of a performance statement either. I would try to use some common sense when you're writing and say as much as you can about your folks, but don't sit there stressing over word choice versus actually saying what they did in a positive way through a good performance statement. So at a minimum, the performance statement, which is what we used to call a bullet, and I'm just referring to that. So we're talking about the same thing here because it's all new terminology. But the performance statement, AKA old school bullet, should tie to the MGA, but it's even better when you can tie it to the ALQs, what that person, the attributes and qualities that person has and is bringing to the table, and how they're bringing it to the table at what level, and tie it to both the MGA and the ALQ. So if you could say they're executing the mission through a high level of job proficiency, or through initiative, or through adaptability, or through 20 other different things that mean the same stuff, now we're starting to show that that person actually is the exception. They are developed to a super high standard in that, and they're using that attribute and that quality to get the job done, so on and so forth, with leading people, managing resources, and improving the unit. So Chief Storman, I'll turn it over to you because I know you got some stuff on this one as well.
Yeah, so with this, keep in mind, if you guys haven't seen an actual EPB, I know you guys have that working document right now, but you only have 350 characters that you're working with, right? So because the executing the mission has 3 things that you can talk about, or leading people has 3 things that you can talk about, doesn't necessarily mean you have to jam pack every idea to fit inclusion, teamwork, emotional intelligence, and communication. Again, you need to make sure that you're writing stuff down and take notes of everything that you did throughout the year. Find out what is most important. You may only have inclusion and teamwork, right? You may have inclusion, teamwork, and some communication, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to jam pack everything. You're gonna come up with a product where you're probably using your working document, and then you use a Word doc, Microsoft Word, and you just start typing in there. It's just like an EPR. I used to take 2 or 3 sentences for one bullet, and then chop it down. You're basically doing the same thing where you're just writing down all your thoughts, and then you chop it down to an actual sentence. But then you want to make sure that you're highlighting the most important things. And it may take out accountability, and you want to focus more on stewardship and finances. You want to talk about saving money with remote depth. You want to talk about saving money with filling of in-route can and things of that nature, so you're not losing for basic training. So managing resources may just focus on the money portion, or maybe the people, and you're going to leave out accountability. But you don't have to jam pack everything into that one ALQ, excuse me, that one NPA for all the ALQs. You'll be fine. So for me, I think on my EPB a few months ago, I think leading people, a lot of it was about inclusion and teamwork, and really communication is the two things that I focused on. But I didn't get all three in one block, but that was okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the ALQs.
Yeah, and I'll pause right there. Does anybody have any questions up until this point that you wanted to ask or want to know, or any input that you want to share?
Chief, I got a question. So with these MGAs, how many performance statements are we expected to include in each one?
2, honestly.
Okay.
For me,
Yeah, and
go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you gonna say?
So for me, I really focus on trying to get you're really only going to fit maybe 2, right?
Yeah.
That it's really all it's going to come down to is 2. It's a matter of how you write it. Can you jam pack 2 things in one sentence and still make it sound effective? But really, you're only going to get two performance statements in one NPA. It's a matter of how you write it, though. And how it's going to sound. Like Chief Branstetter said, I know, don't worry about the white space. You're going to see your EPB once it's out of my eval, and then you're going to be like, oh man, this looks horrible. Even now, we still try to make it 350 characters. But as long as you ain't leaving 6 or 7 spaces, you'll be fine. 1 or 2 spaces, you'll be good. Don't worry about it. Like you said, back in the day, me and Sergeant Perry, we trying to make sure we kiss the line. But now we don't focus on that. So, but yeah, you'll get about 2 performance statements in one.
Yeah, and I'm gonna reiterate some stuff just so it sticks, right? I'm not insulting any intelligence. Remember, a performance statement is a sentence. Like, that's a key thing to remember. It is a sentence. It's not a bullet. It's not a fragment. It's not a run-on sentence. It is a sentence. So that becomes one of the most difficult parts of this whole entire writing process, is writing a sentence. And we're going to get into that. But when you start jamming out and typing, the whole intent is one action with at least one impact or result or achievement tied to it. So you're writing a sentence about something you did and what the result of it was. We'll just keep it simple. What'd you do and what was the result? Or like I like to say, what'd you do and what's the so what? Like, so what? You did that. What's the result? Now, when we're talking about tying multiple things to one action, you certainly can. You can do an action that has multiple results or multiple impacts. Like, that's how you start jamming stuff in. But be careful of getting too long-winded, because when we get to the end of this and we talk about some of the things that we've seen, run-on sentences have certainly been one of those things across the whole Chiefs group, I'll say, has been something that's been talked about, where it's just like a 350 character sentence. And it's like, man, this is like a paragraph I'm reading. So just be careful with that. But yeah, just keep your mind right on it. You're writing sentences. So when you're guiding your folks and you're guiding yourself, I think that's probably been the number one question that I've answered is like, where do I start? Like, and I keep hearing, how many bullets can I put in there? And I keep correcting, it ain't bullets, it's performance statements. We got to get our minds right. If we lead the way and start using the right terminology, everybody else will as well. Like, there's no doubt about that. So when we're talking about performance statements, about the most you're going to fit in those boxes is 2 sentences. So we'll say 2 performance statements. That's not the rule. I'm just telling you that's about what you're going to be working with. And then you have to guide your folks like, okay, let's start this off. Like, how are you going to start? Like, what's a good recommendation? And my recommendation is just type a word in there that you're thinking about. Like, what is that action that you're thinking about that you did that makes sense for this performance area? Like, what are we talking about here? And it might be production is the word. Okay, now let's write a sentence about your production this past year. And you write that sentence however you want to. And then all you're doing after that is you're refining it and making it a stronger sentence. And that's a developmental opportunity for everybody involved. It sounds simple. It sounds super easy. And it's intended to be unprescriptive. Like, there's not supposed to be a lot of rules. Like, you're just writing a sentence and then you're writing it the strongest way you can or to the level in which you're rating that person. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well, is actually writing to the level that you're rating someone. If you're rating someone as the exception, then the sentence needs to tell the reader that. If you're writing somebody that's just like they're developing, like they ain't that great, they ain't horrible, they're just developing, then write it that way. But don't try to make them sound like the exception, because our brains are programmed to do that through bullet writing. We're always trying to write the very strongest bullet that we possibly can. What we need to be doing is writing sentences, performance statements that reflect how our folks actually performed within these areas. Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions? All right, right on. Any questions at all?
Hey, Chief, we have someone raise their hand. Airman. Hey, Mr. Lyle, do you have a question or no? All right, no question heard, Chief.
Okay, cool. Let's roll on to the next slide. All right, we see General Brown right there. We must have evaluation systems that provide constructive feedback, evaluate against qualities we value, and highlight future potential. I think we got a system right now that is legitimately doing that. Like, if we embrace this as the top 3, I think this system does a very good job. And you can see the change in mindset just with the old versus the new evaluation, what the focus was. The old was, did you meet my expectations? Did you meet all expectations? Did you exceed them? Did you exceed most? And it's all driven on expectations, right? Now this new process, it's being driven on needs improvement, developing, proficient, highly proficient, exceptionally skilled with those ALQs. So it's more about a developmental process and a constructive feedback process versus let's just talk about whether or not you met all my expectations. Does that make sense? So we need to be having those conversations that are real conversations about those ALQs and about those performance areas. Because it's really awesome for the large majority of folks on the line, whether you're a senior trainer or a flight chief or whatever the case might be, it's a really awesome conversation to start tying the EPB with the JOB. Like, when you start talking about the job and what folks are doing for a living in these major performance areas and these ALQs, and you start tying them into what they're doing 9 to 5, like, it really, a light bulb comes on. So I would encourage and challenge everybody out there, like, don't just make talking about the EPB like this feedback session that happens on the other side of this recruiting monster. Like, make it part of the job. Like, hey, I'm doing an office visit, and this kind of reminds me a little bit about your EPB, and it reminds me a little bit about this ALQ and this communication or this fostering teamwork or this executing the mission that I'm going to be rating you on at the end of the year. How do you think you're developing those skills? Let's talk about them right now. And it's that constant feedback and that constant communication loop that that's going to make people better airmen. Like at the end of the day, it's going to make us more well-rounded, developed airmen that are focused on what the Air Force is focused on, which are these things that's on that piece of paper. Hopefully that makes sense. Chief Storman, what do you got?
Nothing to add, I'll just reiterate everything you were saying. I'm going to the next slide.
Right on.
Yes, performance statements, ROEs. This is nothing new. Plain language. I've done a lot of record reviews. I've looked over a lot of EPRs in the past, and it's so much recruiter jargon. You can't even figure out what the person's talking about and what they're saying. We're trying to use all kinds of acronyms. Well, right now with the EPB, like we've been saying, it's a sentence. You're creating a sentence. You're starting with whether it be your rank and last name. You may transition that to a first name depending on how many spaces you need. You may transition it to a he or a her or she. But you want to make sure you're using plain language and tell the board what you're trying to say. You don't want to have the board or somebody else try to understand and dissect what you're actually writing. They only have a certain amount of time to review these records, so you want to make sure you're getting to the point and make sure that somebody who is not in recruiting or whatever career field you're in understands what you're talking about. For me, a lot of the times, I'm fortunate. My wife is also an SEL. She's in the med group. A lot of the times, I bounce stuff off of her to make sure that she understands what I'm talking about. And then if she doesn't, then I know I need to make sure I transition that more into a plain language so everybody can understand what I'm trying to say. Again, they're really standalone sentences. We've got 2 sentences typically per major performance area. So you want to make sure that you're getting to the point and you're saying what you mean. Just like Chief Branstetter said, if you're not asking yourself, so what, or who cares, I need you to start doing that. I always ask myself, so what, or who cares? That way, if I can't say, if I can't answer that question, then I know I need to make it stronger. Over to you.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like it's a standalone sentence. It doesn't mean it's one line, right? So if I say one sentence, it doesn't mean it's one line. Like it's going to wrap around. It's just one sentence is what you're looking at. You're limited to characters. So just keep that in your mind. Talked already about each statement consists of only one action and at least one impact, result, or outcome. That's right out of the guidance that came out with the EPBs. This part, the guidance part, is kind of funny to me. It seems like the biggest thing that I keep getting asked for is guidance on how to write the performance statements. Like, can we get some guidance on how to write the performance statements? And if we go back in time a little bit, it's like, God, I hate this guidance. Everybody's got their own way and they tell me how they want to write it and all this. So it's like kind of embrace not having a lot of guidance on this. Like it's not a bad thing. It allows for creativity and a little bit of autonomy and creative writing and writer styles. Of course, you're always going to have that internal organization guidance, which is good. Like it's not a bad thing. Like, hey guys, let's tighten this up, or hey, we need to kind of like change the way we're thinking about this a little bit from an organizational perspective. That's fine. Like that's just good stuff to take care of our folks, and it's normally done in a really good way. Based on experienced people that are like that set on boards or that are receiving feedback on this stuff. But overall, the intent is to be intentionally vague. And that's like the official guidance the Air Force put out is we're being intentionally vague with guidance versus being overly prescriptive. Because when we get overly prescriptive, particularly with writing a sentence, every sentence becomes the exact same thing. Like you start saying the exact same thing. So this is designed to give you some autonomy and some creativity within reason. Just write a damn sentence, right? And there ain't nothing wrong with that. So just write the sentence. Any questions at all about this? Because I know this is a major hang up right here with some of just the simple, like the performance statement writing piece of it.
Yeah, I got a quick question. So
Sure.
with starting these sentences and these statements, do you mix it up? Do you put Master Sergeant Perez and then the next one you do he, or you know, different, how would you mix it up in I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to be prescriptive, but you know, how's the best way to mix that up?
I can, yeah, go ahead.
For me, my first MPA is I started it with my Chief Storman. My second one may be I may go back to a Chief Storman. Later on, I may personalize it in the HLR. We'll probably talk about the HLR a little bit later. I may personalize it a little bit in the HLR and go by my first name. But I definitely switch it up, but I don't want to continue to use the same pronoun or whatever in the first sentence all the way down. You definitely want to switch it up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's something that I was running into, was the same thing. So it's good to hear that, you know, it's good to switch it up. Thanks.
Going to add more on this creativity in the plain language. We want to make sure a lot of us we look directly at what's in front of us, right? We only focus on what we're doing for the squadron. You guys got to think a lot bigger than just what you're doing to impact the squadron. If you're not looking at what the group's doing, if you're not looking at what AFRS or HAP is doing, if you haven't looked at what your flight or what your squadron has historically done, and maybe you exceeded that this year by whatever percent, those are the types of things you want to look at as far as how have you improved from the previous years. Where is your ranking, not just in your squadron, but in the as far as AFRS. I want the board to know what it means to put in 1.2 thousand airmen, right? So as a pro suit, if we put in 1.2 thousand people, a wing is about 999 people, so about 1,000 people. So we manned an actual wing and a couple squadrons. So those are the types of things you want to relay to the board so they understand what you're saying. So you want to make it very creative, but don't just look what's right in front of you. You want to think bigger, as big as possible, while still being very truthful with what you're putting on paper.
Yep, and keep in mind within these performance areas, when you're transitioning, I've noticed, and there really is no guidance on it. It's just something that I've noticed is some folks are using like transitional words, like you're writing a decoration. They'll write that first performance statement, and then I'll see furthermore, comma, Sergeant so-and-so did this, or additionally, or moreover. Like that's not required. Like you can roll right into a performance statement, period. He also, or he did this, or she did this, and start the next performance statement within that same block. Like you don't have to have transitions in between. They don't have to tie together. They can be two totally different things as long as they're complete sentences with an action and a result at the end.
And by doing that, you'll also notice that'll give you more characters to work with by not saying furthermore, he blah, 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 blah. You'll have more characters. So you may start out with additionally with those nice transitions, just like a decoration, and then transition to a different one where it's a lot shorter. You do need more meat inside that in that performance statement.
Yep.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Chief, that's Sergeant Aguilar, 36 again. When you were talking about using those transitional words, are you kind of looking at it more like more of a cop out that we're using to be able to maybe still continue to use like a fluff, or is that something that you're still like giving us points on to be more creative, or is that something that you want us to kind of transition away from?
Nope, I don't care. That's going to be within your unit, to be honest with you. But I can tell you just my personal perspective on it is, I just want to let you know what's actually required and what's not required, so you can make an informed decision while you're writing. So a lot of folks, I think they're thinking that is required, like you would, yeah, like it would be like in a decoration to make it flow really smooth, but it's not. Like I just want everybody to know that it's not required. But if you're a unit commander or if your chief or whoever's saying, no, I want transitional words, then use transitional words.
Understood.
But just not required. Yep.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
You bet. All right. We got any other questions on this? Right on. Let's move on. Okay. Let's talk about a sentence. Okay. Definition of a sentence. Hey, I'm gonna be honest with y'all. Don't be thinking I'm standing up on a mountain talking smack here, because I'm not. Like, I've been writing bullets for a long time. I forgot what a sentence even was. All right, so we're getting into all this sentence stuff. I was like, man, I wish I wouldn't have clept that English comp class, and wish I would have took that class, because I forgot it all. Right. So here's the deal: a sentence is a group of words that expresses a complete thought, not part of a thought. A complete thought. It consists of a subject and a predicate, which work together to form a meaningful unit of communication. The cat curled up on a cozy blanket and fell asleep, right? So we got the subject, we got what the subject did. Make sense? Everybody tracking? Okay. Let's talk about colons, semicolons, because we like to use colons, semicolons, commas, like we use all kinds of stuff. If you're using a colon, you are introducing a list of something. That's the only purpose that a colon exists for, is to introduce a list. My grocery list consisted of colon and list out your grocery list. That's what it consisted of. It's just a list of stuff. Outside of that, you don't really need to use them. Semicolons are used to separate two independent clauses without a conjunction. Sergeant Cloninger, give me an example of a conjunction.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep. Loud and clear.
And?
What's a conjunction? And? Right.
Yeah.
All right. So if you don't have a conjunction, you're using a semicolon to attach those two parts. It's really all it is. And I use an example. Andrew, that would be Andrew Charvat. Just so everybody knows, if anybody wants to send him a message after this presentation, threw cornhole bags against Trent. I'm Trent. Semicolon, no conjunction. He lost 5 games in a row. True story, real result. The next one, with a conjunction. Andrew threw cornhole bags against Trent, comma, and there's my conjunction. He lost 5 games in a row. Either way, he lost 5 games in a row. That's the point I'm trying to make here. How I join those two pieces of the sentence is what changes what punctuation that I use. All right, so is that making sense? Any questions on that? All right, let's lead the way on it.
So you're saying don't have Andrew as a cornhole partner?
That's not what I'm trying to say. You're assuming on that, but you just take it for what it's worth. All right. I'm messing. So, yeah, Chief Storman, do you have anything on this? I was looking at Chief Foreman's name. Chief Storman, you got anything?
Now you just educated me, because I'm like, okay, when do I use the semicolon?
Yeah. Yep. Semicolons can be your friend when you're running low on some space. That's the way I look at it. When you're running low on some space and you're trying to tie two things together, your semicolons become your friends. All right. Active voice versus passive voice. So this is a recommendation. It's not my recommendation. It is a recommendation of the English language, right? So it's the same Trent, and I ain't no English major, right? Active voice sounds better. Like when you're reading it, it reads better. It shows the person actually doing something versus something being done to the person. So, or something happening to the person. So if we're trying to show action, and we're trying to show that we have action-oriented leaders, and we have action-oriented recruiters and flight chiefs and so on and so forth, it's always better to use the active voice whenever you possibly can. We'll get into the difference between active and passive voice, but whenever you can do it, I would recommend doing it. And so would every writer on the planet. Real sentence rules apply to these performance statements. Like all these subjects and predicates and verbs and pronouns and all that good stuff, It all applies to a performance statement. We're trying to show that we can write a sentence, a complete thought with a group of words. Okay. So try to avoid fragments, try to avoid run-ons. A very good trick of this, if you're using any like PDF or whatever preparation document you're using, if it doesn't have the spell check and the punctuation checks and the fragment checks and all that, just copy what you write into a Word doc and let it scan it for you. And trust that it pretty much knows what it's talking about for the most part. Like if it's throwing some weird colors at you, there's probably a reason. Kind of dig into it a little bit and figure out what that reason is. So I'm sure it's wrong every now and then, but I promise it's more right than I am. So I would probably look into it and use it when you can. Any questions about this slide? All right, let's continue along with this English lesson. Okay, so now we're talking about parts of a sentence, subject and a predicate. The part of a sentence or clause, right, that tells us, because a clause is just a part of a sentence because it ain't a whole sentence until the sentence is done, right? So that half of the sentence we're talking about, that tells us what the subject does or is. So the subject you can see in that example, the exam. The verb tells what the subject did. And then the predicate is how it did it, or what it was, or describes it. So the exam subject was difficult is the predicate. Two fragments or two clauses of a sentence come together to complete a whole entire thought. Example 2, the man from the shop is your subject. Your predicate, knows my secret, knows being the verb in that sentence. That ties it all together and says what that subject did and how he did it and when he did it. Making sense? Right on. Next slide. Okay, so active versus passive writing. I alluded to this earlier, and we're going to talk to it a little bit more. So active voice, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about with the strength of writing, right? So active voice, the subject of a sentence takes action, usually by performing the action or making a statement. So simple example, she is writing this essay. So we got subject, verb, subject's doing it, boom, it's active voice, she is writing this essay. And then you see the passive voice. It's saying the same exact thing, but it just sounds a little bit different. It comes off a little bit different. Like maybe it's just not as strong sounding. This essay is written by her. Okay, cool. They're both saying the same exact thing. And we'll go back to another example regarding cornhole. All right. And it's either way, the end result is the same. The cornhole match was lost by Andrew. That's passive. Andrew lost the cornhole match. So it's very direct, it's very action oriented. And now look at how much space it took up. When you compare those two things, I said the exact same thing, and the result ended up being the exact same result. Either way, Andrew lost the cornhole match. But look how much more space it took me to say it, and how much longer it took me to get to the person I was talking about, which is the subject of the whole entire sentence. So the cornhole match in that first passive becomes the subject. We're focused more on that. In the second one, my subject is the person that I am reviewing and that I'm rating on. I want that person's name and I want that person to be right up front in my subject line. So it's the very first thing you hear about. So that's where you gain strength through using that active voice. Any questions on that? And once again, that's not a rule. It's just a really strong recommendation of how to strengthen your writing, give yourself a little bit more space, and get to the point of what you're trying to say. You take out a bunch of stuff that you just don't need to be spending time writing. Chief Storman, you got anything on that, sir?
Just be repeating everything that you're saying. Just think about, thinking about what you guys do day in, day out with SWB or your EADs or anything. You see it all the time where you see the passive voice and it just takes up too much space. Where you'll be able to fit a lot more in your performance statements by speaking active. And again, not a rule. but definitely highly recommend it, because if I see something where you're just speaking very passive, then I'm probably gonna kick it back and have you fix it. So definitely a good rule of thumb.
Right on. I'll let you start off with the next slide since I was yapping.
Yeah, no, I was enjoying the English lesson for sure.
The guy from Louisiana teaching English. This is dangerous.
I'm from Florida, so you know how we can down there. So acronyms and abbreviations again. Many of you would have seen in the past the AFRS writing guide. You've seen the AU writing guide, things of that nature with the different words you can shorten. And I still see a lot of people sending EPBs that trying to shorten words like increase or and stuff like that. You gotta change your mindset. Get rid of everything that you learned over the past 10 to 15 years and change your mindset. We're not focused on trying to shorten words. We want to have a plain language and remove the acronyms as much as possible and remove the abbreviations. So that is the website that you can go to look at the acronym list. I'll let you know now that the list is very small. If you have a MAGCOM, ACC, AMC, AETC, things like that, those types of things can be put on the EPB. But just regular acronyms like BX for the base exchange or something, it's not an approved acronym. You're going to have to spell that out. But you basically just got to change your mindset of how you're used to writing over the past years. But yeah, definitely copy that website down. I don't know if the slides will be shared. If you don't have it, I have it, and we can all send it out and share it internally. Change your mindset is the biggest thing on these abbreviations and acronyms.
Yeah.
Counts matter now. I mean, it's back in the day, you can use 2006 and 2009 and 2004 and all these tricks. That doesn't matter anymore because a character is a character. So you got 350 and that's it.
Yeah, and I think keeping with the spirit and intent of what they're trying to do here is important for us to know. Like it literally states it right there. This is guidance literally off the website. Performance statements, avoid using acronyms and abbreviations. But that's the intent. Avoid using them whenever possible. If you need to use them, if you got something you just have to say in a performance statement and that acronym is an authorized acronym, then use it. But try to not make it the norm. Try to not make it the standard. Try to use it when you absolutely have to. Like when there's no other way to say it, no other way to include it. You'll notice on that site when you go to it, and